the brain is basically a kind of receiver transmitter, but basically a transducer and a kind of it slows down the flow. And so what we're learning is that the brain is just picking up from this cosmic consciousness, which is love. I've said in a previous interview that I believe that, I call them the 5 L's, that initially there's only love, which is the ultimate form of consciousness. And then love gives birth to twins, which are light and logos. And we know that all matter is frozen light, literally is frozen light. If you could release the light in a single human body, you could light up a baseball stadium at 1 million watts for 3.5 hours. If you could release all the photons of light in the human body. So we're basically light, frozen light. And then logos, this beautiful passage in the prologue to John's Gospel, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Everything was created through him, and without him was made nothing that was made, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And unfortunately, Christians think that this only happened once with Jesus of Nazareth. And the truth is that everything that exists is the Word of God made flesh. And so the logos is the kind of that which takes matter and forms it into shape. So it's a morphological agent. It takes the very same matter, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. It makes oak trees out of it. It makes bunny rabbits out of it. It makes human beings out of it, but just a different configuration of these elements. And so
expression of the word, the template.
Exactly. And then these two dance together, they create life. Every life form is a dance between light and logos, between matter and form. And our objective is to learn how to laugh at the illusion, that the world around us actually is real. That we're, instead of realizing that, we're looking at shadows in a screen, again, to go back to Plato, that we're in a cave watching shadows on a screen, afraid to go out into the real world and meet three-dimensional reality. Except the invitation now is to transcend three-dimensional reality and go much, much more higher. And even the mythologies of the world pick up on that. I had a dream last night that said to me, this idea of the magic wand, the Merlin with the magic wand, is actually a kind of the residual memory that initially there were technologies available to us, mystical technologies that allowed for shape-shifting and consciousness transformation, and that all great mystical ritual is an attempt to kind of go back and discover, will Eucharist do it for me? Will meditation do it for me? Will plant medicine do it for me? So we're trying to go back to these magic wands that actually awaken our deeper level of consciousness, just exactly as Plato indicated. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel compelled to, inspired to toss this in here, and it has to do with the conversation you and I had. It was more of an individual nature. And I remember you said to me, when you meditate on that, see if that has application for the whole, not just on an individual level. And so I went into the meditation and I was shown that you have generative and degenerative states of consciousness. And that the thing I was looking at had fallen into a state of degeneration, a degenerate state. And at first my mind was, when I was listening to this, it was a little bit judgmental about degenerate. We always think of a pervert, the very colloquial ideas of what degeneration is. And I thought, no, that's not what that means. This is more specific. So I thought, I'm going to look up the dictionary version of degeneration, and it was exactly what it was applied to. So you're talking about people, beings throughout the cosmos, including some of them you talked about in our last program together, those forces that are generating light, they're generating love, they're generating resources, they're generative, versus degenerative, which must live off of almost in a predatory state off of the generative forces. And so how does that plug into this conversation versus kind of reducing it to the nature of good and evil? How does that even fit in? But that's the answer to what you asked me. I did meditate on
Brilliant, love. Brilliant.
So does that fit in on any
So I had an image a few days ago where I'm sitting in a room and I'm looking at where the floor meets two side walls. And the mathematician begins to realize we've got three axes here. Going from the corner to the right, I'm going to call it the x-axis. Going from the corner to the left, I'm going to call it the y-axis. And going from the bottom, the floor, to the ceiling, I'm going to call it the y-axis. And it felt to me that I could represent life using those three axes. In actual fact, any point in the room can be located by the distance along the x, the y, and the z-axis. Any butterfly anywhere, you can locate where it is. So I call the x-axis, I call it compassion. The y-axis I call freedom, and the z-axis I call self-awareness. And so it seems to me every one of us is located somewhere with those axes. So the really selfish, self-engrossed person is stuck in the corner. They have no compassion for anybody. They're in service to self. They're not really free because they're addicted to power and control. And so they're scoring 0 on X, 0 on Y. And self-awareness, they're addicted and kind of totally identified with the ego, the skin kind of encapsulated self, on a range that could bring them all the way to their own divinity. A place that could give them free. The Y-axis could take them to freedom. The X-axis could take them to compassion, and the Z-axis could take them to their own inner divinity. But they're stuck in this corner. And I call those homeosociopathicus.
And that would be the degenerative path.
The degenerative one. The generative people then are somewhere up at the back, where their compassion is for others, where they're free because they're not kind of addicted to power. You know, they're willing to go where the spirit guides them, and their self-awareness is they've disidentified with their physical self, with their kind of their mental self, with their personality, with the job they do, with their relationships they're in, and they're identified as a fractal of source. And now they're somewhere up behind in the corner. So these would be maybe the Mother Teresa's, or the kind of the Jesus Christ, or the Buddha figures, whom I now call, Homo Christus, people who are maxed out on all 3 axes. And that for me is generation, and degeneration is the retreat back into the corner at the bottom on the floor.
Beautifully put. Yeah.